They say money can't buy love. But in my case, love bought my wife everything. The house, the cars, the weekends in Napa, the jewelry she swore were on sale. I worked 40 years, every sunrise, every broken back to build a retirement we could both rest in. But when I opened our joint savings account that morning, I didn't find peace. I found emptiness and a single transaction that made my heart stop. $480,000. Gone. Transferred quietly in the middle of the night to an account under her name, and that's when I realized my wife wasn't planning a future with me. She was planning a future without me. Retirement was supposed to feel like freedom. For 40 years I wore the same routine like a second skin: coffee at 6, work by 7, dinner at 7:30, bed by 10. When I finally hung up my hat, I thought I'd earned a little peace. But peace doesn't last when you're living with a liar. I remember that morning vividly. Rain tapping against the window. The smell of burnt toast because Linda never paid attention to the toaster. She was humming in the kitchen, cheerful, too cheerful for a Tuesday. I was paying bills, updating our joint account, the one we'd built slowly since our wedding day. Then I saw it, $480,000. Transferred. The date, 3 weeks ago. The account name, L. Prescott Holdings. My hands froze on the mouse. Linda's maiden name was Prescott. At first I thought it was some kind of mistake. Maybe a wire error, maybe a tax issue. But when I asked her, casually, just testing the waters, she dropped the spatula. "Oh, that," she said too quickly. It's an investment. You wouldn't understand, Henry." That's what she said. After 33 years of marriage, after all the nights I worked double shifts to keep our mortgage afloat. "It's an investment." You wouldn't understand. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I went through the paperwork, our bank statements, old tax returns, even her emails. What I found made my stomach twist into knots. She'd been moving small amounts for months, 5,000 here, 10,000 there. Little withdrawals I never noticed because she always handled the household expenses. But 3 weeks ago she made her move, the big one, $480,000, and she didn't just move it to a random bank. She moved it into a company she'd secretly started, L. Prescott Holdings, LLC, a shell corporation. My wife had turned herself into a business, and I was her biggest investor. She thought I wouldn't notice. She thought I'd just keep smiling, making her coffee, mowing the lawn, pretending I didn't see what she was doing. But I'm old, not stupid. So I played dumb. I kissed her goodnight. I asked about her investment. Then the next morning, while she was at yoga, I drove downtown. I met a friend of mine, retired FBI accountant. He owed me a favor. We pulled every record, every document tied to L. Prescott Holdings, and that's when the story started to unravel. She had opened the company 6 months ago, registered it under her maiden name, listed a silent partner, a man named Thomas Gage, her financial advisor. The same man she'd told me was helping her with the taxes. It wasn't just money she was stealing. It was time, trust, me. When I drove home that night, I didn't feel angry. I felt something worse, cold, empty, like every laugh, every smile she'd ever given me had been rehearsed. That night, as she slept beside me, I stared at her hand resting on my chest. The same hand that signed away almost $500,000 of my life, and I whispered to myself, "You think you're clever, Linda, but you forgot who taught you how to read a contract. Because before I retired, I wasn't just an engineer. I was a man who made sure every detail was watertight, and now I was about to turn her own lies against her." The morning after I found the company papers, the world felt quieter. Linda poured my coffee like nothing had changed. She still smiled that familiar smile, the one that used to mean warmth, but now only looked like strategy. She didn't know that I already knew everything. I sipped my coffee, looked her dead in the eyes, and said, "Maybe we should talk to that Thomas fellow sometime. I'd like to know where our money's going." Her hand trembled. "Just a fraction of a second, but I saw it." She laughed too loud, too fast. "Oh, Henry, you'd be bored to death. Numbers, contracts, business jargon." I smiled back, pretending to buy it, but inside I was already laying my trap. That afternoon, I went to my office, the one she thought I'd stopped using after retirement. I still had my old tools there, a fax line, a second laptop, a filing cabinet full of dusty envelopes. And on the top shelf, locked in a metal box, was something I hadn't used in years, my legal power of attorney papers. She had never bothered to revoke them. I could still sign on behalf of both of us for any joint holdings. And as luck, or justice end would have it, L. Prescott Holdings had been seeded entirely from our joint savings, meaning half of that money was still legally mine. I called my friend Carl, the ex-FBI accountant. "Carl," I said, "I want to know everything about this Thomas Gage. Bank accounts, debts, girlfriends, whatever you can find." He laughed. "You planning to sue him?" I paused. "Not exactly." That night Linda came home late. Her perfume hit me before she even said a word. Not the kind she usually wore. Expensive. The kind that doesn't come from department stores. I stayed in the den, pretending to watch the news. She leaned against the doorway. "I'm meeting investors next week. Might need to travel for a few days." I nodded slowly. "That's so. Well, don't let anyone take advantage of you," she smiled. "I never do." When she went upstairs, I pulled out my phone and opened the email Carl had sent. Inside were 6 attachments: credit history, photos, tax records. Thomas Gage wasn't an advisor. He was a failed broker, 2 bankruptcies, 1 fraud investigation, and a warrant for unpaid alimony in another state. Perfect. Over the next week, I built my plan like I used to build bridges, piece by piece. No weak points. Step 1. I reopened our joint investment account, transferred $10,000 into L. Prescott Holdings, labeling it as capital contribution. That made me an official investor in the company. She couldn't claim it was hers alone anymore. Step 2. I used Carl's connections to leak a tip to a local business paper, a rumor that L. Prescott Holdings was under IRS review. Not true, not yet, but enough to make her nervous. Step 3. I called Thomas Gage directly. He didn't know who I was at first. "This is Henry," I said calmly. "Linda's husband." The silence that followed could have cut glass. He stammered something about partnerships and confidential agreements. I let him talk himself in circles, then said one thing before hanging up. "Thomas, if you think she won't turn on you when the money dries up, you're a bigger fool than I thought." By the next morning, he'd frozen the business account. Linda's company was suddenly locked. She panicked. She came storming into my study, waving her phone. "Henry, did you move money out of the joint account?" I looked up from my crossword puzzle. "Oh, that? Just a small investment." She blinked, her eyes narrowing. "In my company?" "Our company," I said, letting the words sink in. I watched her face change. Fury, fear, disbelief. Then she hissed, "You don't know what you're doing." "Oh, I do," I said softly. "I'm just getting started." That night she packed a small bag. She didn't think I saw her, but I did. She left quietly, thinking she'd come back when things cooled off. But I had already prepared for that too. While she was gone, I met with my attorney. I showed him everything, Transfers, fake company documents, the partnership filings. He whistled. Henry, she committed marital fraud. You can freeze every cent she touched. And so I did. By the time Linda checked her bank the next morning, all her accounts were frozen. Her company, our company, was under full audit. Thomas Gage had disappeared, and for the first time in years, I slept peacefully. That was the first stage of my revenge, but not the last, because money wasn't the only thing she took. She took my dignity, my trust, my name, and I was going to make her feel the weight of all three. When the bank froze her accounts, Linda's perfect little world started to crack. It began with a single phone call, muffled shouting from upstairs, a door slamming, then silence. I sat downstairs in my armchair, pretending to read, listening to every piece of her composure fall apart. She came down a few minutes later, her lipstick smudged, her eyes wide with panic. "Henry," she said, voice shaking, "there's been a mistake. The company account is locked." I looked up from the newspaper slowly. A mistake? Or a reckoning? She stared at me, confusion twisting into anger. "You did something. Don't lie to me." I folded the paper neatly, set it down, and said, "Linda, I don't have to do anything. You already did it to yourself." That stopped her. For the first time, she looked at me not as her husband, but as someone who might actually be her equal again. Maybe even her enemy. She tried to read my face, but I kept it blank. Years of being underestimated had taught me one thing. Silence scares liars more than shouting ever will. She started pacing, muttering to herself, pulling out her phone, calling someone who didn't answer. Probably Thomas. Her voice rose in frustration, then broke entirely. When she hung up, her hands were trembling. "They froze everything," she said, almost to herself. "Our savings, my business, even the personal cards." "Our savings," I said quietly. "You mean the ones you stole?" Her eyes darted to mine. "I didn't steal anything." "I was building something for us. You were too old, too tired to understand real opportunity." That one hit hard. Not because it was true, but because she believed it. I stood, taking my time, walking past her toward the liquor cabinet. I poured a glass, the clink of ice filling the silence. "You think age makes a man blind? You think all those years of trust mean you can rob him blind and he won't notice?" I turned, my voice calm but sharp as glass. "You forgot who I used to be, Linda. I didn't just sign paychecks. I built entire systems that caught frauds 10 times smarter than you." She swallowed hard, stepping back. "You can't prove anything." "Oh, I don't have to." I handed her a thick envelope. Inside, printed emails, statements, transfers, even screenshots of her messages with Thomas. Her face drained of color as she flipped through each page, her hands shaking harder. "Where did you—" "Doesn't matter," I said. "What matters is what happens next." I laid it out simply. She could sign over every company asset to me and walk away free, or I could hand the entire file to the IRS and watch them dismantle her life piece by piece. For a moment, she just stood there, the woman who'd smiled her way through every lie finally stripped of words. She looked older, smaller, like a reflection of herself fading. Then slowly she nodded. "I'll sign," she whispered. That night, she left. No goodbye, no closure, just the sound of the car pulling away into the dark. I stood by the window long after she was gone, the silence heavier than any victory could ever feel. The days after she left were strange. The house was too quiet, but not in a bad way. It was peaceful, honest. The kind of silence you don't realize you've missed until it's back. I kept busy. Carl called to tell me that Thomas had skipped town and that the IRS had officially opened a file on L. Prescott Holdings. Linda's name was all over it, but she'd given them enough to go after Thomas first. She'd thrown him under the bus to save herself, just like I knew she would. I didn't need to say a word. I just watched it all play out from my porch day after day, sipping coffee as the morning paper told the story for me. A month later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, no note, just a cashier's check for $80,000. My money. Clean, crisp, and silent. I stared at it for a long time before laughing quietly. It wasn't the money that mattered. It was the message. She'd lost everything. Her pride, her partner, her plans. The woman who thought she could outsmart me ended up doing exactly what I wanted, paying me back in full. I deposited the check and never looked back. Sometimes, late at night, I'd think about her, where she might have gone, whether she blamed me or herself. But the truth is, it didn't matter anymore. My revenge wasn't about destroying her life. It was about reclaiming mine. I cleaned out her closet the following week. Her perfume still lingered in the air, faint and bitter. I threw out everything except one thing, a small photo of us on our wedding day. I placed it in a drawer and shut it, not to remember her, but to remind myself that even the closest person to your heart can turn a knife if you let them. I learned something in all this. Revenge isn't loud. It's not fire or chaos. It's the quiet moment when the liar runs out of lies and you still have peace left in your soul. That's what I got back. My peace. My life. She stole $480,000 from our savings, but I made her lose everything money could never buy.